Greetings, friends. I came up with 7 reasons why the military should be restricted to men only. Maybe I'll start with the first reason, which is that it's cruel and barbaric to women to put them on the front lines. Can you imagine putting women in the landing craft on D-Day in 1944? That would have been very cruel. It would have been a very immoral act for society to put their women in that position. I think it's unspeakable. A society that does that, well, they can get away with it for a time, but they're acting contrary to who we are in our nature as men or as women. There are certain roles God laid down for us, and they do shift within the culture or the time, but there are other general rules and archetypes which are timeless. Women are meant to nurture and produce. Men are meant to produce in a different way, but men are the ones who plan and act. It's just working together, cooperating. Both together are making it possible to have a civilization. War is a masculine activity. Some women can have deep violence come out of them, but when that happens, it's almost like more of a masculine energy. That's the whole thing. It's like the masculine transcends even what men are, and the feminine transcends even what women are. To some extent, that's true. So war is getting in touch with men making the ultimate sacrifice. Men are meant to sacrifice themselves, hopefully not always with their life, though, but we do sacrifice because that transcends, so we can strive for a higher meaning, higher purpose. And that's why men can lead and women follow, but they can support each other. So that's generally the first reason why the military should be only for men, because that was probably the most diplomatic way to start the video. I did a video before this, but I got to that reason that I just read now towards the end, and I feel like a lot of people would just want to stop watching. I don't know why it's a touchy subject when you say, oh, women shouldn't do this, or men are meant for doing this. It's a touchy subject, but for me it seems so natural to want to talk about these things. It's so obvious, and I don't see why any of this should even be offensive. It's like really the way we lived for most of our history, and people say, oh, I'm living in the past. Well, I'm living in the present and the future too, because these things are always going to be there. So the second reason would be the most obvious one. Men and women are physically different, with different physical capacities, different physical abilities. Yes, there are rare exceptions, but when we talk about being put in combat, and in terms of your the nerves fraying or just the physical capacity to endure without food or water, or running, or being alert, needing to take cover, like these sorts of things, like needing to aim, without getting into the deeper aspect of the culture of war, which is tied up with masculine aspects. You're taking a fish out of water. And yes, there are the exceptions I'm going to mention, because we've got the Soviets in World War II with their female battalions, female snipers. We have the Kurds of northern Iraq. We have the Kingdom of Dahomey in Benin, Africa, in the 1890s when they fought the French, and they had a whole battalion or a small army of African Amazon women warriors. I view all these things as kind of abominations, where the culture, the society is destroying its own spirit for utilitarian purposes, just to survive short term, pragmatically, cynically, to survive, power, Machiavellian, which cannot work long term. It can maybe work short term, but it kills the spirit of your people. Or that kingdom persists, but they persist in a barbaric level, because those are barbaric things to do. I think in the case of the Kingdom of Dahomey, these Amazons were employed in the direct frontal assaults. They were like the warrior class, or one of the warriors. So very bizarre culture, and there is objective morality, so some things are just questionable. The worst thing is when you mix the men and the women in the same units. If you're creating all-female battalions, that's at least more sensible, because it's acknowledging the differences between men and women, the fact that you would create an all. But I still think it's equalizing on a more meta level, because it's diluting warfare as being the sphere of men only. and it's now becoming diluted. Like you're diluting the Boy Scouts with now females. The same thing for like the concept of the military, which has been going on for generations. So there are these exceptions, like I've just mentioned here, but it doesn't prove that that's the right thing to do. The second or third reason is that when you really allow men and women to be in the same theater of action or the same physical surroundings en masse, when that happens in the Army or the Navy, they're going to distract the men. Some of the men, surely, and some of these women are going to get pregnant. And it happens. It happens in the Navy. It happens in the Army. It's going to cause jealousy. I don't necessarily mean the pregnancy, but the jealousies between men or between whoever, affairs, flirtations, this kind of thing. Not a good atmosphere to have at all, especially when you have to be focused on the enemy. But if we look at these like aircraft carriers with several thousand people on them, the population of a small town, they have plenty of females and men together there, and I've seen documentaries of this. They go on shore leave and then they go to nightclubs and they drink, and who knows what happens. But these are people in their 20s, 30s. What do you think's going to happen? They're Americans, or in the British Navy, I think the same thing happens. And when was the last time a U.S. aircraft carrier was in a serious combat situation? Not really since World War II. Like some very minor things happen, maybe in Vietnam, but really there hasn't been anything significant. So it's just not really a long-term way of keeping a military strong. I just think there's a certain nature. This is how we are. When you do something blatantly like that, like just mixing, what do you really expect is going to happen? And they'll be raped by the enemy. That's the other thing. If women are in the army, and then, like as may have happened in Ukraine, we've heard stories. It's entirely plausible. They said they brought Chechens in there, and then they raped Ukrainian women who were women soldiers, or that shouldn't be surprising that would happen. I'm not condoning it. That's a bad thing to do. That's a grave sin. But it happens in war. Why would you put your women again? Why would you put them on the front lines like that? Only a cruel and barbaric society would do that. But as far as I can tell, all the world powers do it. Ukraine, America, Britain. I don't mean Ukraine's a world power, but all the current in that NATO club, or all the modern militaries. No. Russia, probably Russia. I mean, Russia pioneered this stuff during the Soviet Union anyways, so it's not like they're leading the way. No country is really leading the way, as well, maybe some smaller countries are. But the whole modern project is to just mix and interchange humans, and just try to deconstruct everything. And it's based on a lie, as I hope you see. They're going to be raped, or they're going to be killed, or they're going to be injured, or just sent back to the rear. That's going to take other men. You're going to be putting other men to use more resources now to support these women, because they have particular needs that the men might not have. Some things I can just say that's cruel and barbaric. I don't have to go into a philosophical treatise and explain my presuppositions of, why is that cruel or barbaric? Like some things I'm allowed to rest my worldview on, and you can take it or not. The point, though, is that it doesn't matter about utility. There are some moral principles that are worth living out, as I should say, even if, for the sake of short-term gain, you sacrifice honor or dignity. Honor or dignity are tied in with the timeless. But women do contribute to the war effort, of course. They contribute to the war effort as a united people, if this is the ideal situation, by supporting at the home front and being faithful to their husbands, of course. But I don't know if it was a good idea to start putting women in the factories, because now we've seen modern warfare do that as an excuse to really mix up the male head of the household, further dilute that by, we got to bring in the women to make the munitions during the world wars, or at least during World War II. And yeah, so I mentioned making female battalions. That's more sensible. I still don't agree with it in principle, but at least it's more realistic than mixing the genders together. If you really wanted women in the military, fine then. And I understand a lot of people grow up in military families, like in the U.S., and so their mom and their dad were both in the military. They have their military pensions, and It's something they do. I mean, I understand if you're coming from there, you'll have maybe a different opinion on this. I can respect that. But if you celebrate the female battalions, then that's a problem. If you're celebrating the action hero, like Wonder Woman or whatever female archetype it is, if you're celebrating that now, that's where you get into a more broad problem, which is the erosion of the masculine hero archetype, which is fundamental to our society, to really any society which hopes to sustain itself as a civilization. You need to have that masculine archetype, and it's not the space of this video to get deeply into that, but once you start elevating woman into the realm of the war, the figure of war, the god of war with a small g, when you're elevating them there, Saint Michael, the archangel, he's a man, right? He's occupying that station. Saint Michael is not a woman. And the final reason is that it would be dishonorable for a man to be killed by a woman. I mean, I guess it would be bad for all parties involved. Oh, your women managed to shoot one of the enemy soldiers. I guess you would congratulate them, but maybe you might feel sorry for that enemy soldier because he just got killed by a woman. And it's nothing against the woman, but it's like, as a man, knowing that, what would you think if you knew that you were going to get killed by a woman? That would be like a dishonorable way to die. And it's nothing against the woman. It's not motivated by any hate. It's just like certain offices, certain functions. You're mixing that which isn't in its natural course. That's all I'm saying. It's nothing negative towards any human, male or female. I mean, it would be bad for all parties involved, but there's a reason that in military history, like if the officers would be shot and the common soldier, like if you caught like a traitor or someone who had to be executed, but they're an officer, they would be shot like by firing squad. They might even have some last words or whatever. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe they gave last words to everyone, I don't know. But commoners who were sentenced to execution were like hung. So there's a difference in, I know that's a bit different because it's men killing men, but yeah, they didn't get, as far as I know, they didn't get women to do it unless you want to humiliate the enemy. It's making a humiliation of death. Death is bad enough. It's bad enough that people die in war. You don't need to humiliate the dead by mixing roles, mixing archetypes of our fundamental culture. Hasta luego, amigos.